Well, welcome and thank you all for joining us. I think you're all sort of probably fairly familiar with me, but I'm Becca, I'm the marketing manager at Call of the World, and today's session is going to be led by Lynda Campbell. So I'll introduce her shortly, but she'll be taking us through leadership in the age of AI and humanity today. So if you're not aware of us, we deliver experiential leadership and team development programs in the Rec and Beacons and try and create unforgettable experiences that have a lasting impact in the workplace. So Lynda Campbell is one of our senior leadership coaches and has over 20 years experience in senior leadership roles, specialising in cultural transformation.
We lost you then, Becky, there. I tell you what, guys, I'll kick off because I'm not quite sure what's going on, but we seem to have lost Rebecca.
Don't worry.
Do you want to go on mute, guys? Do you want to go on? Some of you go on mute. We can just hear a few background noises and I'll kick off if that's okay, because I'm not quite sure what's happened to Rebecca. But it's hilarious that we're talking about technology and this just happened. So welcome. In terms of how this is going to run, we want it to be as interactive as possible. There's going to be a few polls in here, although I may need Rebecca to come back and we actually do carry out the polls. So I'm sure she will. She'll rejoin at some point. So if I do skip past the polls, we'll come back to them when Rebecca joins, because we want to hear from you on a couple of the key things that we're going to talk about in terms of where you think you're at in your organisation. Also, if you want to put comments in the chat, if you want to ask questions in the chat, then please do. The one thing I will say, though, is, you know, we're embarking on this journey as well. We've been doing research in this area for the last 6 months, and we don't have all the answers. It's a journey for us. But what we are doing is trying to think about what might be out there, what research we think is relevant, and how we can take these things on board ourselves and also put it into the work that we do in Call of the Wild. So hopefully you'll get something out of today. But like I said, we're all embarking on this journey. So if I kind of kick off 1 second, because would you believe there's some drilling going on? Oh, Rebecca's back. So I just thought, are you okay? I'm just going to double check before I go in, Rebecca, that you're okay.
On mute.
No. You're on mute, Rebecca. I will kick off. I'll carry on. Okay. So we've been researching this space for some time. And for those that came to one of the previous webinars on managing multi-generations in the workforce, this fits within that piece of work and how our leadership is evolving. And it's not a revolution in any stretch. This is about evolving our leadership and picking up on some of the skills that we need to make sure that we tweak along the way that are going to help us in this world. So this session, what it's not about is AI tools. We're not talking about anything like that. That's not our specialism, or technology or platforms or systems. It's about leadership, but it's specifically about how leadership decisions are made differently. And at the moment, probably without us even noticing. Most of us today already work with AI-enabled systems every single day. We just don't think about them. Now, I'm going to see if Rebecca is back, because we've got an opening poll that we'd like you to think about. So let me just ask if Rebecca is now okay with her tech, and we'll open up the poll. If not, I'll carry on.
I am here. I don't know if you can hear me. I seem to be just a little bit behind, so I'm sorry, bear with me, and I'll share as soon as it allows me, which it's loading.
It's loading. So what we wanted to think about is, how does AI or data-led systems most often show up in your role right now? And Rebecca will load the poll, and you can see that there's some options. And we'd love if you could give us an idea of what's going on in your workplace. So you've got the options up there. Is it showing up through dashboards?
Yeah, that's now loaded, sorry.
Okay. Is it showing up through dashboards, targets and performance reports, through rota, scheduling or workload systems,
through risk flags, alerts and compliance checks, through HR processes, so absence management, performance, recruitment? Or is it showing up in everything? It influences decisions more than you consciously realise. So we'd love it if you could just give us an idea of what you think you're seeing in your areas. Okay, so mainly, which is probably what I would have thought, through dashboards, targets, and performance reports seems to be the most in terms of where it's showing up. But there are numbers already showing up in through some of the other systems. Rotas was the big one. Having worked with many of you, and where you operate rotas and scheduling systems and workload systems, I would have expected that. And I guess then 19% say that influence decisions. Sorry, they're influencing decisions more than you consciously realise. So it's already there. It's this quiet shift that's going on. So let me continue. We've got a second poll now, and this is about your behaviour. So now you've thought about where it might be showing up. What happens when they flag something? What usually happens next? So I'm going to ask again, Rebecca, just to share some options, and we're really interested in what you do when these systems and data flag something. So you've got, I act quickly, I sense check before acting on something, I question if it doesn't feel right, I feel pressure to follow the process, or I'm not always sure how much I can challenge it. We don't usually question the data. What do you think's going on in your organisation and your behaviour? And I wouldn't overthink it. Let's see what the results say. Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, the good news is that we're not acting quickly, because that's the danger we have. And we're going to touch on that danger as we go to the webinar. So we've got some people sensing, about a third sense checking before acting, or 40% I question if it doesn't feel right. It's just over that. But interestingly, 5% I feel pressure to follow the process. We need to unpick that as part of this webinar. And 20%, which is still quite high, a fifth of you, I'm not always sure how much I can challenge it. We don't usually question the data. And that is some of the danger that we're in terms of leadership. But we'll explore how we can tweak our thought process and our behaviours and our mindsets so that we do the right thing when the data is telling us something. Okay, so let's explore. That's good insight for us. So some of the point of this is, are we deciding or are we approving? Years ago, we would be deciding. We have morphed more into approving, and there's this subtle shift going on. So rotas, dashboards, forecasts, performance flags, risk scores. So the real question is whether you consciously lead those decisions or whether you are gradually being pulled into approving what the systems have already shaped. And that's where we need to build on our curiosity. That's one of the key skills we're going to talk about. So the good news for us is this is still all part of the leadership evolution. It's not a revolution. I mentioned that earlier. This is about tweaking and checking how we think and lead. We're not trying to drastically change things. So my background is all operational leadership, and most of the people we work with is with operational leadership, operational HR, people and culture parts of the organisation. And AI doesn't remove leadership, we know that, but it does concentrate it. It gives us a focus. It doesn't arrive loudly, and it doesn't announce itself. That's the quiet shift that's been going on. But that's why it's powerful. And that's why now is the time for us to think about the skills we need to tweak or bring more to the forefront. So more and more, we're moving into this shift. There's a shift that is happening quietly in our organizations, and leadership is evolving from us making decisions to more and more approving decisions that have already been shaped elsewhere. But the risk here is, when does approving become following? And I guess looking at the polls earlier, there is that risk, whether we feel that we can question decisions. So danger, the danger isn't bad AI. The danger for us as leaders is quiet compliance. It's when we defer to systems that becomes the habit. We can't be talking about the system said and the system did. It's about us to make the judgment. So leadership is the judgment that thins this out. So using data versus deferring data. The data informs our judgments. Deferring to data, this is one of the big things we're going to try and shift. Deferring to data replaces our judgment. And the leadership piece, it lives in the difference. This is what, this is where the humanity and the thinking comes from. Old model leadership expectations, expertise, experience, having the answers and controlling things. The emerging model is judgment over knowledge, curiosity over certainty. We're going to talk a lot about curiosity today. Ethical awareness, when are the right decisions to be made from an ethical and humanity point of view. Emotional containment and meaning making sense of the data, making sense of what something's telling us. And for us, curious leadership is the skill. It's a key skill here. And I'll introduce you to a couple of authors who say the same thing. So we're not inventing this. This is some of our research in terms of looking at what's been out there. Curious leadership is a key skill. It's not hesitation. When we teach curiosity as a skill in our leadership training, curiosity can slow us down a bit, but longer term, it gives us the right answers. It can take longer to question things than just to go with the flow. So it's a disciplined thinking. It's pausing before acting. It's asking better questions, and it's stopping autopilot leadership. It's absolutely key. But here's the thing, right? Where does our curiosity go? We lose our curiosity in the madness of the day, in the VUCA world we're living in the fact that we're doing 100 things at the same time and so many things to get to, and we have people to lead and time to spend with people. And that's when we can lose our curiosity. This skill is also really closely linked to the work on growth mindset, Carol Dweck's work on fixed or growth mindset. We can lose our curiosity every day without realizing. And there's a number of reasons why. One of them can be something we all carry. And the longer, unfortunately, for the longer our experiences are, the more we can have something called mental fossils. Mental fossils are things that get us through and are based on our experience that may have been very relevant 10 and 20 years ago, but sometimes we don't, if you like, create new fossils. We rely on our experiences. We can lose curiosity through something called mental fossils. Excuse me. So where did it go? It goes through routines and rushing to meetings, multitasking, our desire to be right. As a leader, we often have a desire to be right. It can be stress and overwhelming situations. We can choose efficiency over exploration because exploration can take us a bit longer. And also we can lose our curiosity when we think we know the answer. So we just plow ahead with something. So it's an absolute key skill in terms of this leadership evolution we're talking about. And Julia Galef coined this phrase, this piece of work previously, which we use in some of our work, called the soldier and the scout mindset. And this supports our evolution in leadership, really. 30 years ago, leadership would have sat more in the soldier mindset. For those of us that are old enough to remember, we defend our beliefs, we seek certainty, control, and we probably would avoid being wrong. For all the right reasons, that's what a soldier would need. And that used to be elements of the leadership style from previous. But later generations enter in the workforce, and this links to the webinar last time around multi-gens in the workforce. Later generations enter in the workforce. They're taught to think differently. They're taught to be curious. They're taught to be critical. And they're much more in line with what we call a scout mindset. So a scout mindset explores what's really happening. They test out assumptions and they value accuracy over being right. And so when we talk about curiosity, we talk about, as much as possible, developing a scout mindset, because that's where curiosity lives. So let's just bring this to life a little bit. A performance dashboard flags someone as underperforming. I've been there and I've seen this. You haven't observed this directly, but the data looks convincing. Immediately, pressure starts to build. Your leaders expect action on underperformance. The data is there right in front of you. And if you ignore it and something goes wrong, that feels like it'll be on you. That's a typical scenario. Now, I'm going to come back to that after we go through a little bit of explanation about what we need to be doing, and then revisit that. So no, curiosity didn't kill the cat. What happens is not quite abdication, it's quiet compliance. And over time, this is where our leadership judgment gets eroded. There's a critical difference between using data and deferring to data. Using data informs the judgment, deferring to data replaces it. And we are definitely in the camp of using data to inform our judgment. But we may have to help some leaders with some of the skills that we think are required to be in this place. So it's a discipline, it's not a personality trait. And I'm just going to call out a couple of key books if any of you are interested. One of the best books I've read that only dropped about 2 months ago is a book called Dropping the C-Bomb, Dropping the Culture Bomb, from a company called Elevate, who, for any of you may or may not know them, they are a group of people that used to be in a company called Blue Sky. They're a performance organization. But they've brought out one of the best practical leadership books I've read, helping set people up, leaders up for now and the future. I'm going to call that out because I've read the book and I think there's some really good stuff in there. They particularly talk about curiosity and adaptability as leadership skills. And equally, if you're interested in the future, then Jacob Morgan is probably one of the, the prolific authors on the future leader. And I'll show you his kind of 4 mindsets and 5 skills. But one of the mindsets he advocates is to develop the explorer mindset, again, which is closely aligned to the scout mindset. So I think what I'm saying is most of the future thinking leadership researchers and authors are saying the same kind of thing. They might be coming at it from a different way. So in an AI-shaped world, curiosity prevents leaders from defaulting to systems. So the key shifts we need to see is from asking, is this right, to what might be missing, from what's the solution to what's the real problem, from I need certainty to I need to explore. And there's some of the subtle shifts, but they take a little bit longer. This is Jacob Morgan's work. I'm not going to go into it, but I am going to just talk about 2 of them. So he talks about 4 mindsets and 5 skills. The 4 mindsets are on the left, the 5 skills are on the right. More and more, in terms of leadership and in terms of the work we do at Call the Wild, coaching as a leader, absolutely key. The Yoda reference on the far right is all about emotional intelligence. It's all about bringing out our humanity in leadership. And he calls it channel your inner Yoda. The translator bit is about how you translate messages from, the top of the organization to what's meaningful for your people. The tech teenager is about not being scared of technology, but trying to embrace it. The futurist, horizon scanning, all the things that we're trying to do. And you can see in there, the chef actually is interesting. The chef is about how do you blend the 2 ingredients of humanity and AI together? So, absolutely backs up, or we're backing up the work he's been doing, but, it kind of falls into what we're doing. Servant leadership is how do you support your team? How do you put yourself at the bottom of the pyramid and you are there in service of, your people and removing blockers and various things. So makes sense in terms of a lot of the work in the future leader. And it's a lot of what we've adapted in the work we do in Call of the Wild to try and future-proof our leadership and keep everybody evolving. So where the leadership skill still matters most, AI is brilliant at spotting patterns, patterns, averages, trends, probabilities. And I tell you a piece of work that bears that out. Rebecca and Call the Wild got some funding from the Welsh Government to do some research to do our own research, if you like, on what the future generations need in the workforce. And if we would have looked at trend data before, and averages, it tells us one thing. But actually, when we've dug much deeper and asked more questions, there's more commonalities in what the workforce wants than we thought. And we'll share, we're kind of working through this research now. We will share it at a later date. But by us being much more curious and going deeper, we found out much more than just the averages and the trends were telling us. So systems don't see the context, leaders do. And leadership lives in exceptions. The context is important, fairness and efficiency. And I'll go back to the scenario I set up earlier, when we apply some of this, how we'd look at it differently. Accountability doesn't sit with the system. Nobody ever said the system was wrong. The accountability sits with the leader and the consequences. So that's where leadership matters most. So if we slow down and we unpack the last scenario, think about context. So an absence pattern from that previous employee looked concerning on a dashboard. But I know, or the leader knows, that a person has been covering gaps for months. We know what pressure they've been under. You know what else is happening in the team. So if leaders don't introduce context and systems do not stay neutral, so they quietly harden the decisions, leadership softens the hard edges that the data can't see. That's where we, the kind of human element has to play alongside AI. So the takeaway, curiosity is not soft, and it's not a soft skill. It's what we call it, it's accuracy under pressure. And it's under pressure we most need that skill to come to the forefront. And then the second skill that we believe that you need is adaptability. Adaptability in this mad world that we're working in, and adaptability that when we see something different or there's no clear answer, we can do something different. So it shows up when there's no clear right answer. How do we adapt? We haven't got certainty anymore. So adaptive leaders, they name certainty without losing authority. They make trade-offs visible, and they adjust decisions without being embarrassed about why they've got a different route or changed something. And this becomes critical because AI increases speed and pressure. And you will more and more get organizations and boards wanting speed as as AI just comes more and more into our worlds. So adaptability and curiosity are two of the key skills that we want to hone in on. Sorry, let me move that one on. So how does curious and adaptive leadership sit in a multi-generational workforce? So this now goes back to our work on leading in a multi-generational workforce. It doesn't disrupt the skill first. It disrupts confidence. And that confidence can be disrupted in different tenures of our careers. So longer tenure colleagues, confidence is often built from competence, which we've built through experience along the way. AI can sometimes feel like a threat, maybe to our status, not to our experience of what we know, but actually maybe to what we hold dear. Resistance here is often, it sounds dramatic, but it's a kind of grief. It's not stubbornness. It's a kind of letting go of something and accepting that something different is there that we need to grab onto. Mid-career operational leaders, the pressure's different. You're expected to deliver, to translate change, and to reassure others. AI can sometimes feel like just another thing that exposes you rather than supports you. And we want to move away from that. And then finally, for newer colleagues, comfort with tools can sometimes outpace judgment. Speed is not wisdom. So it's a different type of concern for the newer entrants into the workplace. And they live with speed every day. Adaptive leaders slow things down without shutting people down. The leadership task here is stopping confidence gaps before they become capability gaps. That we've got to really think about how we help in all of those three areas. Those gaps don't become capability gaps. So how do we think about how we go forward and what support we give? So we've got another poll, which I want to introduce. And this is for us to continue to involve as curious and adaptive leaders, because I'm connecting this to psychological safety. We need certain conditions in our organizations to be true for us to develop these mindsets and bring the humanitarian side, the human leadership side to the forefront. Which of these feels most fragile in your organization right now? Trust, fairness, confidence, psychological safety, or accountability? So just let us know where you think you are. It's just really interesting. Okay. So most fragile is probably, obviously, trust is there. And it's interesting because when we're working with organizations on high performing teams, and we often use Patrick Lencioni's 5 behaviors model, trust is the most trickiest to get right. And it's the one that everybody highlights when we're working with them, that there is still work to be done. So it's really interesting that the trust is you guys are kind of saying the same thing. The other one that stands out for me is accountability. Again, all part of a high performing team. Start to trust, work up into healthy conflict. If you trust each other, committing to a decision, and then taking the accountability. And again, it's interesting how accountability is still showing up as being fragile in organizations. And I wonder what's going on there, again, all to be explored. Okay, that helps us, and that's quite interesting in terms of where we're heading. So what do leaders need to focus on? We're very practical and practitioners in Call the Wild, and we try to, although we might have research, we try to embed what people can practically do that will help, especially, like I said, we've got operational backgrounds. Not everything. You don't need to focus on everything, but just a small number of critical things. Decision ownership is one. I'm going to show you two things in a second, and decision explanation. Who owns the decision? Because it isn't the systems and the data. So be explicit when you're accepting a system recommendation and when you're overriding it. And again, you can see there, curiosity needs to be there as a discipline. Decision explanation. People don't need to agree with every decision, but they do need to understand it. This absolutely links back to multi-generations again in the workforce, when one of the bits we talk about with organizations we work with is the later generations into the workforce and their desire to understand the why and ask questions. And if we think Gen Z asks questions, wait until Gen Alpha comes into the workforce, who are at the moment around 14 and 15 and have grown up with the technology at their fingertips and being taught to be curious. I've got a 4-year-old granddaughter who don't stop asking me why 55 times a day on everything, and I find myself taking all day explaining everything to her. So decision explanation is important in explaining the why, and you own it. Curiosity is a discipline, and then confidence, leadership. They're the 4 things to think about, and things sit within those. But I'm not asking to reinvent the wheel. We're just asking to evolve some of these disciplines that we already have. So let's just talk quickly about decision ownership. Not ownership is when we say things like the system says, or this is the policy. One of my worst things I hate to hear, the policy says, the system says. Decision ownership is on the right. Based on the data, I've decided, or this is the call we're making and here's why. That's decision ownership. So the ownership sentence should be based on X, I've decided why. That's where you own it. Instead of the dashboard excuse me, let me move that on. And then decision explanation, a weak explanation, we're changing the rota because of the demand. Strong explanation is where we explain context, trade-off and path forward. Demand has increased over the last month. We're prioritising service coverage over shift preference the next 4 weeks. We'll review it at the end of the month. Which one of those statements builds more trust? and then think of the generations in the workforce and their desire to know the why. We've got to get better at explaining our decisions. So we always talk about the practicalities of what you can do. What can you do differently on a Tuesday morning? Well, here's four practical moves you can make. The pause move. Before acting on system recommendations, ask one more question. What might this be missing? What might I be missing? The second one is the ownership move. Never hide behind the system says. Instead say, based on the data, I've decided. These are practical. The trade-off move. Explicitly name what you are prioritizing. We are prioritizing fairness over efficiency, if that's what you're doing. And then finally, the review move. When unsure, decide and review. An example there, this is our call for now, and we'll review it in 2 weeks. So things like testing assumptions and reviewing has to become part of the way we work. And this isn't, I wouldn't call this a new agentic leadership. I wouldn't call it a new concept in leadership, but the term is starting to come to the forefront in terms of being agentic means using AI to inform decisions, but then stepping in with human judgment when context, fairness, and trust are at stake. And that's exactly the operational skills leaders need. So this is where curiosity keeps us thinking and adaptive leadership keeps us adjusting. So you may start to hear it. It's not really a concept in leadership, but it does mean how we blend, a bit like Jacob Morgan calling it the chef. How do we blend our decision making with AI by putting context, fairness, and trust in? And then this kind of is bringing us back to what we talked last time about the type of leadership needed for leading multi-generations. We highlighted these human skills as key: empathy, human, curious, adaptable, and strong. And in fact, I think we showcased Jacinda Ardern as somebody who sort of showed these skills and lived these behaviours. And she was probably a good role model that we could look at when we're trying to demonstrate how that can feel and you can see. And there's lots of others out there. But it comes back to the same thing in terms of being more human, human-centered leadership. So it's what leaders protect. Our systems optimize efficiency. Leaders must protect what can't be automated. There's 3 non-negotiables: dignity in how decisions are experienced, fairness, judgment, not sameness, and confidence, especially across the generations. So empathy, that many years ago used to be and I still hear it, where people say it's a soft skill. Empathy becomes operational, not optional. It isn't optional to develop your empathy skill. It's absolutely a guaranteed requirement for moving forward in terms of leadership. Just some examples in the world of work. Amazon, their operations and logistics company, the part of the business, AI optimizes their routes, their shifts, and their productivity, but leaders override the systems for safety, well-being, and to explain decisions face to face. That's part of how they work. They've introduced that as leadership skill in how they work. So the system recommends, the leader decides, the leader explains. That's the leader's role. NHS England, safety critical leadership, AI supports diagnosis and triage. They've got a clear rule. AI advises, humans decide. Formal permission, and this is one for HR and people and culture parts of the organisation to think about. Formal permission exists to override systems without penalty. It's still the leader's decision, and they encourage people to formally override systems, obviously without penalty, because they want the human element. Trust improves when people know the system doesn't outrank them. And then one more, Unilever, workforce planning. AI supports forecasting and workforce planning. Leaders are trained in decision-making, not blind adoption. Learning is expected at every level. And they've got a saying, if you can't explain the decision, you don't understand it. So let's not just keep going forward blindly. So implications for operational leaders. We're winding down now to the end, the end of this and trying to give you some practical things to think about. Operational leaders experience AI where the decisions actually land. So the key focus areas for operational leaders are decision and ownership explanation. I've talked about that. Fairness and efficiency trade-offs. Where's it the right thing to do? And where do we need to really think, and where is it the wrong thing to do? And sometimes we have to balance this efficiency versus fairness. Using curiosity before action, adapting without hiding behind the systems, and protecting team confidence. They're the things that I would suggest are key focus areas for operational leaders. Implications for people and culture strategy and people and culture teams, and I kind of split this into two. What HR or your people team do next quarter. Define where AI advises versus where humans decide. Build overrides into your policy language. Apologies for that. That's me and Becky not putting that in the right way, but audit where systems reduce discretion. Add fairness checks to dashboards and train leaders in decision explanation. And equally L&D, and I guess they've mixed up these two really. Add judgment labs to programs. Teach leaders how to explain trade-offs. Practice override conversations. Develop coaching capability. We've talked about that, and build multi-generational confidence sessions. The one thing the multi-gens can help each other with is in the tech world. They can absolutely support each other in this world that we're moving into. So we want you to help us really, and just to write one reflection in the chat. And we're kind of winding down to just a couple more slides. What's one leadership behavior you need to strengthen in an AI-shaped world? So everything we've talked about, would you just put one reflection in the chat for us? What one leadership behavior you need to strengthen in the AI-shaped world, or you think need to strengthen in your organization? We'd really appreciate a bit of your knowledge. It helps us in this whole world and the world we're working in. So if I can just ask you to do that for 30 seconds, and then we'll just summarize and go into any Q&A. Okay, really good. So curiosity, honestly, I can't stress it enough, because we do lose it in every day. I need to be more confident in adopting it. I've been reluctant. I don't understand the systems in my life experience. Same here, kind of thing. It's not. We'll get that in that. There's organisations that will teach how these work, and then there's and then we need to teach the human side of it, which is the world that we're talking about. Ownership's coming up over and over again. If you can't explain a decision and you don't understand it, I think is really key. So brilliant. Thank you for that. Keep coming. That's amazing. That will help us. And Beck's going to try and save some of that. Okay, so we're winding down. I want to leave you with a couple of final thoughts. If today has surfaced questions for you about confidence, ethics, decision-making, or how you lead through uncertainty, that's not a problem to fix. It's a signal that we just need to evolve some things. This work isn't about becoming more technical. It's about becoming more human, more intentional, and more grounded as a leader. What won't be replaced by AI is judgment, courage, presence, trust. They're all the things that as humans we bring to the workplace. And at Call the Wild, our work is grounded in a really simple idea. We've got a leadership system. Strong leadership starts with leading self. You have to lead yourself well before you ever can lead others well. So that extends into leading others. And ultimately, when you lead others well and you lead self well, that ultimately shows up in how we lead the business. So our leadership system is all about leading self, leading others, leading the business, and that's how it builds. The strongest leaders are not the most technical, but they are the most deliberate. they're curious enough to question, they're adaptive enough to adjust. And some of us can be quite rigid. You know, adaptability is something we really have to get used to, especially in the world that we are. And they're confident enough to own decisions in a world that increasingly offers us recommendations. We are hounded with recommendations in all walks of life. Just think about shopping recommendations, things that come up on Facebook. We have to make choice and we have to make judgment. So we have to get more curious. So leadership focus should be on developing curiosity in our thinking, adaptive in our response, human-centered in impact, and agentic in ownership. Excuse me, AI doesn't remove leadership, it concentrates it and it focuses it. And that is the end of our presentation. Thank you for listening. We're opening up for any questions, and we'll also, if you want to pop a question in the chat, that's fine too. Let me stop sharing. The one thing let me just stop sharing. The one thing that we also can offer is we have developed a kind of one-page takeaway that if you're interested, if you contact Rebecca, she can send it out. So we've pulled a one-pager on operational leadership. We pulled a one-pager on what people and culture teams may want to think about. And we've also pulled together a self-reflection thing. You can do a little bit of self-reflecting, which may help you then uncover where you think you need to go. So there's a couple of takeaways. If you want them, just email Rebecca and she will send them out. But any questions, Rebecca? I'll hand it back to you in terms of hosting this part.
Thanks so much, Lynda. That was great. Thanks, everybody. I've just popped the feedback form in the chat. So if you wouldn't mind completing that, I've also put my email address in there. And I've put a link to our next webinar, which is going to be on Friday, the 20th of March, which is with our colleague Vicky Perkins on supporting a neurodiverse workplace. So I will also, I've seen a couple of comments already saying that they would like the summary sheets. So yeah, just get in touch if you'd like that and I can share that with you. I will share a recording of the meeting, of the webinar, sorry, and the slides, because a couple of people have asked about the slides. So yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us. And please do complete that feedback form. All that feedback is really helpful in shaping these sessions and what we do going forwards. So thanks so much.
Thanks everybody. Have a great weekend.